Hey Reddit, my name's Kayla. I'm 22 years old, and buckle up because my stepmom drama is straight out of a reality television show. To set the stage, it has always been me and my dad, Richard, who is 48 now. My mom passed away when I was 12, and from that moment on, it was just the two of us against the world. Dad was not perfect, but he was solid. He worked long hours as a mechanic, never spent money on flashy things, but always made sure I was taken care of. He was practical, reliable, and somehow, even through grief, managed to keep life stable for me. I grew up being the helper kid. I helped him with bills when I started working part-time at 16, covered groceries sometimes, even chipped in for car repairs when his old truck broke down. I thought that was my role in the family, and I did it willingly because I loved him. Then 2 years ago, Stephanie entered the picture. Stephanie is 37, with blonde hair extensions that fall past her shoulders, eyelash extensions that look like they have their own zip code, acrylic nails longer than a CVS receipt, and that whole boss babe, I do not need a man, but I will use one anyway, energy. She called herself an entrepreneur, but all I ever saw her do was host those infamous MLM wine parties and post endless selfies with motivational captions like "Hustle harder," "Queen," and "Life is a mindset." She moved into Dad's house within 2 months of meeting him, acting like she had lived there her entire life. She rearranged furniture, changed the paint in the guest bathroom, and started leaving her expensive candles and branded water bottles all over the kitchen. At first, I tried to be patient. I thought maybe she was just different, maybe she needed time to adjust, maybe I was overreacting. Then came the first dinner. She invited me, Dad, herself, and two of her friends to a fancy Italian restaurant. I thought it might be a bonding opportunity, a way to smooth over the tension. I did not realize that this dinner would set the stage for the nightmare to come. The check arrived, and it was $1,200. I thought I was hallucinating. Stephanie leaned over with a syrupy smile and said, "Oh, sweetie, you're an adult now, right? Let us split it." My heart sank. Dad looked tired, like he did not want a scene, so I caved and paid. I felt like I had just handed over a small fortune, and all I got in return was a fake smile and her friends laughing about the smart girl who chips in. That was only the beginning. Every Friday after that turned into a supposed family dinner, except it was never family. It became Stephanie's parade of friends, book club ladies, and random people she claimed were networking connections. The bills were astronomical. One week it was $1,500, another week $1,800, and sometimes over $2,000. I worked at a local bookstore cafe, making $14 an hour plus tips, which was barely enough to cover rent, groceries, and school supplies. Yet there I was, subsidizing her wine-fueled entourage because I wanted to keep Dad happy. I thought I was doing the right thing, sacrificing a little so he could enjoy this woman's company, even if I did not like her. The breaking point came with the infamous $4,000 dinner. Stephanie invited half her book club, their husbands, and ordered like we were in a Vegas VIP lounge. Lobster towers, champagne, bottle service, desserts that cost more than my monthly rent. I watched her and her friends laugh, sip, and take pictures, all while I quietly calculated how much I could actually afford to eat that week. Out of the $4,000, $2,900 was literally her and her friends. When the check came, she slid it across to me, whispering with her usual saccharine tone, "Sweetie, let us split." I snapped. I told her straight that I was not her ATM, that I did not order $400 lobsters or 3 bottles of Dom, and she needed to pay for her circus herself. Her face was priceless, like Starbucks had run out of oat milk during pumpkin spice season. She stormed out, fuming, while Dad sat there stunned, unsure what to say. I walked out too, but not before letting my anger settle into a sharp clarity I had never felt before. The next morning, at 8 a.m., she came pounding on my door, screaming as though I had burned down her entire Shine wardrobe. She screamed about how I was ruining my father's happiness, accused me of being jealous and broke and pathetic. I just sat there, stunned at the audacity, thinking she was yelling at a college student for refusing to bankroll her over-the-top lifestyle. That was when I realized Stephanie was never in love with my dad. She was in love with the image, with the trophy of him. Dad was a prop for her Boss Babe brand, and I was expected to be her co-sponsor. I decided to fight smart. I started collecting receipts, screenshots of her posts bragging about treating her friends while leaving the bill for me, conversations on Facebook Marketplace where she sold jewelry Dad had gifted her without him knowing, and Venmo screenshots where she asked for money from her friends after dinners she never paid for. I compiled everything meticulously. I created an anonymous email account, sent the evidence to a Twitter account known for exposing influencer frauds, and waited. Within 48 hours, she was trending for all the wrong reasons. Memes circulated of her yelling at me, captions mocking her extravagant spending, and her high-class image was systematically dismantled online. Comments roasted her $20 Shine dresses she pretended were Prada. Screenshots of her lying about paying for events were shared widely, and people finally saw her for what she really was. Dad was furious at first, thinking I had crossed a line, but when Stephanie saw her carefully curated influencer persona crumbling, she bailed. No dramatic goodbye, no apologies, no empty promises. She packed her knockoff designer bags and vanished. Dad was crushed at first, but eventually he admitted he had been blinded. We now laugh about it. He will joke that Stephanie thought she was Kim Kardashian at Olive Garden. My role in this drama has solidified into a lesson about boundaries, respect, and the lengths people will go to when they are using others for image rather than love. And here's my question for Reddit. Would you have nuked her reputation like I did, or just walked away? After Stephanie vanished, the house felt almost too quiet, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Dad and I spent a few days just existing in the aftermath, cleaning up the mess she left behind, her half-used candles, her designer knockoff bags tossed in corners, wine glasses still sticky from the last overpriced dinner she forced us to fund. It was surreal, almost cinematic, the way the chaos had evaporated overnight, leaving only the traces of what had been forced into our lives. For the first time in months, I realized that the house felt like my home again. It was a place of stability instead of a revolving door of Instagram-friendly chaos. Once we had some space, Dad and I had a long talk. He admitted that deep down he had known Stephanie was draining us financially, emotionally, and spiritually, but he had wanted to believe she was different. He had wanted to see a woman who could bring light into our lives after Mom passed away, someone to fill a space that should never have been replaceable. He told me he felt guilty, genuinely apologized for not protecting me from being exploited, for letting her turn my part-time paycheck into her personal slush fund, and for letting me shoulder the weight of adult responsibilities when I was still figuring out college and life. Hearing him say that, seeing him acknowledge the mistakes, made me feel a mix of relief and grief. Relief that he finally understood what I had been experiencing, grief for all the time and energy wasted on someone who had never truly cared about either of us. We decided then and there to cut all ties. No more checking in, no more awkward social media interactions, no more pretending to be cordial when it was anything but. Dad went through every platform, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, even LinkedIn, and blocked her. It was a ritualistic cleansing of her presence from our digital lives, but it felt necessary. Every notification I had expected from her vanished, leaving our phones quiet for the first time in what felt like years. The house was ours again, a sanctuary rather than a battleground. Stephanie, as expected, did not take the disappearance silently. About a month after she left, she tried reaching out indirectly. A mutual friend contacted Dad, claiming she wanted closure. I could feel my stomach twist when I heard that, like the air itself had thickened. But Dad, who had learned the hard way how manipulative and self-serving she could be, did not respond. He didn't respond. Life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, but it was tinged with the lessons we had learned the hard way. Dad started taking more control of his own life and finances, keeping me out of adult decisions that were no longer mine to manage. We started rebuilding our routines, going back to simple Friday dinners that didn't involve half a dozen strangers or $2,000 wine bottles. The house, once filled with chaos and pretense, began to feel alive again with our own energy, my music blasting in the kitchen while I baked cookies, Dad tinkering on his old truck in the garage, and both of us laughing at inside jokes that had nothing to do with social media personas or fake smiles. At the same time, I started noticing subtle changes in myself. I was more assertive, less willing to bend to unreasonable demands, and more careful about who I trusted with my time, energy, and money. I realized I had been given a crash course in spotting manipulation and entitlement. I no longer felt obligated to make people comfortable at my own expense, a lesson Stephanie had forced me to learn. Though life was quieter, the scars of what happened with her lingered. Social media would occasionally remind me of her presence through mutual friends or tagged posts I could not see, but it no longer had power over me. Every day, I felt a little more grounded, a little more myself. Dad and I shared a renewed bond, built on honesty, accountability, and the knowledge that we had survived something manipulative together. That bond became the foundation for everything that followed, from weekend trips we planned on our own terms to small victories, like finally fixing the old garage door that had been broken for years. Stephanie's disappearance was a strange kind of liberation. Her absence allowed Dad and me to reclaim our home and our lives. It was not without frustration, anger at the wasted money, the stress, and the emotional exhaustion, but it was also a moment of clarity. We learned that boundaries were not negotiable and that love should never be leveraged for material gain. She had tried to make us into props for her own life, but without her presence, the facade crumbled, and we were left with the truth. A father and daughter who had each other's backs, no filters, no lies, no overpriced dinners. Then came the final, almost anticlimactic confirmation that cutting ties had been the right choice. Stephanie's mutual friend reached out again, more insistent this time, claiming she desperately needed closure, hoping to stir up the chaos she had left behind. Dad did not hesitate. He did not reply. He didn't respond. Work has been a huge relief lately. I still spend most of my hours at the bookstore cafe, but the energy there has completely shifted. Instead of tension and exhaustion from dealing with family drama, I'm surrounded by people who actually make life feel lighter. There's this woman named Linda who works the morning shifts. She's 45, divorced, and carries this aura of calm that somehow makes everyone around her feel at ease. From the first day I met her, she treated me like more than just a coworker. She treats me like someone worth mentoring, someone worth seeing grow. Linda shows me recipes she swears will change my life, little tricks for making mornings smoother, and sometimes even brings extra pastries from home, insisting I take them for my lunch. She steps in when I'm drowning in college deadlines, quietly covering shifts or picking up slack without making it feel like a burden. She celebrates small victories with me, like the first time I learned how to correctly froth milk for a cappuccino or when a regular customer complimented the display I arranged. Over the course of a single week, she has given me more warmth, attention, and genuine encouragement than Stephanie managed in the 2 years she was in our lives. It's not just her generosity, it's her presence. There's no pretense, no image to uphold, no expectation that I bankroll extravagant dinners or entertain her ego. She is simply kind, consistent, and genuinely interested in helping. Watching her interact with customers is like seeing the opposite of everything Stephanie ever did. She listens. She remembers names. She laughs at the right moments without ever making it about herself. It makes the cafe feel less like a job and more like a space where I belong, where effort is met with appreciation rather than exploitation. Linda has this uncanny way of noticing when I need a boost without me having to say a word. She'll hand me a recipe for a simple homemade bread when I look stressed, or offer advice for balancing shifts and assignments in a way that feels practical rather than patronizing. Her wisdom comes from lived experience, not motivational quotes plastered across Instagram. She's built a life for herself that feels authentic, and she somehow inspires me to want the same for myself: stability, kindness, and genuine connections instead of drama and showmanship. We've talked about life in passing, about the ups and downs of divorce, parenting, and learning to navigate adulthood with a little grace. One day, while joking over spilled coffee and laughter echoing across the empty cafe before the morning rush, she mentioned that Dad could really use someone like her, someone grounded, not a wine MLM enthusiast who only cares about appearances. At first, I laughed, brushing it off as casual banter, but the thought stuck. I started noticing how different Linda is from Stephanie, how easy and natural her kindness feels, how it doesn't come with strings attached or expectations. It's tangible, unforced, and real. Watching her interact with the world makes me realize that a good relationship, the kind my dad deserves, doesn't need to be dramatic or flashy. It's comforting to have her in my corner while life outside the cafe still has its complications. Dad is rebuilding slowly, learning to enjoy his life again, and I'm learning to focus on myself and my own happiness. Linda has become a quiet anchor, someone who shows me that compassion, generosity, and stability are real things that exist outside the chaos Stephanie brought into our lives. Being around her makes me feel grounded, like I am finally seeing what a healthy, positive influence in a family dynamic looks like. The contrast between her presence and Stephanie's is stark, and I can feel the shift not just in my mood, but in my perspective on relationships, boundaries, and what I deserve as a person. As I finish another long shift, wiping down counters and stacking returned books, I catch myself thinking about how far we've come. Life is slower, calmer, and filled with small moments of joy that I used to overlook. Linda's laughter echoes in my memory as I walk home, and I realize how rare it is to find someone who genuinely enhances the people around them rather than draining them. Observing her, learning from her, and having her in my life has been unexpectedly transformative, and I finally understand that some people enter your life to remind you of what healthy, steady, and real relationships actually feel like. My dad deserves that, our home deserves that, and even I deserve to witness it firsthand. I can see it. A few weeks after Stephanie disappeared, life had finally begun to settle into something resembling normalcy. Dad and I were establishing routines again, laughing over small domestic victories, tackling house projects together, and reclaiming our home from the chaos she had left behind. The air in the house no longer carried tension or forced politeness. It carried laughter, music, and a sense of relief I had not felt in years. I had started to breathe easier, finally feeling like the weight of someone else's drama had lifted, even if the scars were still fresh. Then came the twist I did not expect. Stephanie showed up. She appeared at Dad's garage one late afternoon, standing there with her hair slightly disheveled and her expression a mix of desperation and calculated charm. I had been inside the house, tinkering with my laptop, when I noticed her car in the driveway, the same car she had used to parade her influencer lifestyle around town. My stomach sank. I knew what this meant before she even stepped out. She looked like she had rehearsed her apology, the kind of carefully constructed vulnerability designed to manipulate, but the reality of it was jarring all the same. She cried, or at least she tried to. Her tears were loud and performative, spilling over the edges of her mascara as she spoke to Dad about being misunderstood and how her reputation had been ruined because of jealous haters. It was everything I expected and nothing I wanted. My mind raced as I watched from the window, remembering all the nights I had sat awake, stressed over the bills she forced me to pay, the lies she told, and the endless parade of friends she shoved into our lives. The sheer audacity of her showing up after all of that felt surreal, like a scene from a sitcom rewritten for cruelty. Dad, who had been quiet, listening, finally spoke. He was calm, measured, but there was an unmistakable edge to his words that sent a chill through me. I had spent years watching him navigate life carefully, trying to avoid conflict, sometimes too hesitant to protect himself or me. But in that moment, I could see the transformation. He set boundaries with an unwavering firmness that I had never witnessed. He made it clear that our lives were a package deal and that any attempt to hurt me again would mean she was permanently out of our lives. The conviction in his stance was electrifying, and it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. Stephanie's face crumpled, and she left crying, her performance finally clashing with the reality of someone who would not be manipulated. Watching her drive away, a strange sense of satisfaction settled in. The fantasy of control she had always clung to, the illusion that she could insert herself into our lives at will, had finally been shattered. For the first time, I realized just how much power Dad's protection had given me. Not money, not material comfort, but the validation that I was worthy of respect and care. That day marked a turning point. It was not just about Stephanie leaving again. It was about the realization that Dad and I were no longer a house divided by fear, obligation, and manipulation. We had become a unit built on trust, understanding, and mutual respect. The air in the garage, filled with the scent of oil, metal, and old leather, felt charged with newfound strength. I could feel the shift in our dynamic. I was no longer carrying burdens that were not mine, and Dad was no longer allowing someone else's ego to dictate our lives. After she left, we spent the evening working on his old truck together, the silence punctuated only by the sound of tools and our shared laughter. Every turn of the wrench, every repaired part, was a small reclamation of normalcy. I realized how much emotional labor I had carried for so long, and how much lighter life felt now that boundaries were clearly defined and respected. I was learning to trust not just Dad, but my own instincts, my own sense of self-worth. The encounter also revealed something I had not fully recognized before. Dad had grown. He had been hurt, blinded by hope and infatuation, but he had learned. He had realized that protecting his daughter was not negotiable and that no one who treated us poorly deserved a place in our lives. His firmness and clarity gave me a sense of security I had never experienced, and in that moment, the house felt like a real home again, a sanctuary where trust and respect were the foundation. Stephanie's brief return had been a test, one that neither of us needed, but one that ultimately strengthened our bond. It was the first time I'd ever seen him stand up for me so clearly. Linda actually came over for dinner last week. I had invited her without telling Dad ahead of time, casually saying that a coworker was joining us, and it turned into one of the most unexpectedly wonderful evenings I've had in years. From the moment she walked in, the energy shifted. She carried herself with an ease that made the house feel lighter, like someone had opened a window and let fresh air sweep through rooms that had been stagnant with stress and tension. Her presence was calm, warm, and genuine. There were no fake lashes, no manicured ego, no boss babe cliches, just her stories, and her laughter. Dad and Linda hit it off instantly. I watched from the kitchen as they joked over small things, trading stories about books they'd read, meals they'd loved, and little life lessons they had learned along the way. Their connection was effortless, the kind of easy companionship that had been absent from our home for far too long. Dad laughed that night more than I had seen him laugh in months, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of relief settle over me. It was as if the house itself was smiling, a quiet witness to the return of warmth and normalcy. Linda wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't performing for attention or status. Her presence was honest, grounded, and comforting, the kind of presence that made you want to sit quietly and absorb it, knowing that life could feel safe and uncomplicated. She helped in the kitchen, shared stories from her morning shift at the cafe, and even laughed at Dad's clumsy attempts to cook pasta without burning it. Watching them together, I realized that this was what healthy relationships looked like: mutual respect, humor, kindness, and no underlying agenda. Reddit. Here's the part that almost made me cry. After dinner, Dad quietly asked me if it would be weird if he asked Linda out. My chest felt tight with emotion. All the years of chaos, manipulation, and tension with Stephanie rushing into contrast with this moment of clarity and hope. I could see the genuine warmth Linda had brought into our lives, the way she had given me motherly guidance and affection without demanding anything in return. It hit me how far we had come, how the house that once echoed with shouting and manipulation was now filled with laughter and connection. I told him that Linda had given me more motherly warmth than anyone since Mom passed away, that her kindness, consistency, and grounded nature were exactly what we needed, and that if he was happy, I was happy too. Seeing him smile, free from the lingering shadows of the past, I felt a surge of relief and joy that was hard to put into words. All the battles, all the stress, and all the sleepless nights had led to this, the possibility of a genuinely healthy, loving family dynamic, one that was built on care, trust, and authenticity rather than manipulation and pretense. The evening ended with all of us sitting around the kitchen table, laughing over small anecdotes and sharing plans for the weekend. The house felt alive, not just with the sounds of voices, but with a sense of hope and healing that had been absent for years. I could feel the tension that had clung to me for so long finally easing, replaced by a sense of security and contentment that comes from knowing that your family is no longer fractured by toxic influence, that love and support can be steady, reliable, and real. Looking back at everything that happened with Stephanie, the chaos, the lies, the financial exploitation, and the emotional roller coaster, I can finally see the full arc of our story. It was painful, exhausting, and sometimes humiliating, but it also taught us boundaries, resilience, and the value of genuine relationships. Now, Dad and I are not only healing, but we are thriving, and having Linda in our lives is a gift I could never have anticipated, but am endlessly grateful for. So here we are, a house filled with laughter, warmth, and the beginnings of a family that works not because it is forced to, but because it is built on mutual respect and love. The trauma of the past has been replaced by hope, and every day we are reclaiming the stability and joy that had been stolen from us. To anyone who has followed this story, thank you for being with us through this journey, for sharing in the highs and lows, and for letting me tell the story of how chaos, heartbreak, and manipulation eventually gave way to love, trust, and genuine happiness. Goodbye, Reddit, and thank you for being with us through this whole story.